A man ahead of his time. Halston, London, 1905. Countless murderers throughout history have caught and convicted because they didn't plan ahead. But Arthur Devernock knew precisely that he aimed to get away with murder by foolproof planning of the most miraculous kind. Alas, for poor Arthur, through his forward-thinking approach proved to be the very thing he finally convinced the trial jury of his guilt and condemned him to the gallows. Duval was working for a chemist in Hastings when he met his future wife Beatrice there in 1896. They married 2 years later in Paddington, but after the birth of their first son, Stanley, they began to struggle financially. Beatrice was an accomplished musician and might well have contributed significantly to the family income, but for the ultimately arrival of twins, Eugene and Lawrence. 1903, Duval doted on young Stanley, but he resented the twins from the moment they were born. Feeling the pressure and solely breadwinner, Arthur Duval struggled to hold down his job and began to suffer emotionally. Attempting to improve his lot, he resorted in illegal and bizarre behavior, first forging false references to gain position and then posing as an American millionaire. But those exertions into fantasy paid it no dividends, and by December 1904, Duval family were in dire straits. The month they moved into the top floor flat of Elliston's Harlesden, northwest London, under the assumed name of Edgerton. By the time Arthur Duval had already decided to rid himself of the main drain of his resources, his wife and the twins, the catalyst for the dreadful deed surely occurred on 2nd of January 1905 when Arthur was released from his post as a chemist assistant in Kilburn. Miss Duval and the twins were last seen alive 28th of January. Although Arthur told neighbours and the milkman that they had gone to Plymouth for a rest cure, Beatrice Duval's mother provided together to convince, and her tip off to the police immediately led them to the trunk deposit in a warehouse by Duval. It was opened on the 13th of April and found not to be contained bottles of chemicals that Duval had insisted it did. Instead, tightly crammed inside the trunk was bodies of Beatrice Duval and her 20-month-old twins, both still wearing nightgowns. Duval was picked up by police by the new place of work in Coventry in charge of murder, to which a 34-year-old in Coventry and the charge with murder. All plead not guilty in the trial in June. The jury seemed to have a simple task, but Duval concocted an elaborate story that might sow the seeds of doubt in the minds of the more substitutable members of the panel. His vision was that on the morning of the 28th of January, he argued with his wife, taking Stanley out for the day, and returned to find his wife and twins dead in a bed smelling of chloroform. It was clear that the case of suicide, he said, had only the fear of suspicion would fall on him had he led him first to pack the trunk with a gruesome cargo, then to pack Stanley off to boarding school in Kilworth, and finally to pack himself off to a new life in Coventry close to Stanley's school. It might have washed with the jury but for Duval's particular brand of forward planning, for he had managed the deed done before it actually occurred. The jury began seriously to wonder when they heard the landlord of Halston Flat testify that Duval said he would only need it for 6 weeks, but the cliche was Duval replied to a job advertisement which sent off in January 13th, a full 15 days before the wife's death. It proved to be unlucky 13 for Duval. For his letter, he described himself as a widower. It was a fatal trait. Many walks of the life of a glimpse of the winning post too early. Duval wishful thinking proved his final undoing, having unwittingly proclaimed himself a murderer ahead of his time. He was pronounced guilty by the jury after 10 minutes consultation. As an object lesson in forward planning, the case of Arthur Duval is best treated with caution by anyone intent on murder. One word out of place has cost him his life. He was hanged in Pentonville Prison on 15th of August 1905. Next read might be in this book, Murder by Request, Guildford Assizes, 1919. Next one, The Law, Strangest Cases. Good book. Hope you enjoyed that. Speak to you soon. Neil, MMA, UNA.